Morning, midday, and evening sacrifice. The dappled die away, cheek and wimpled lip, the gold wisp, the airy gray, eye, all in fellowship. All this beauty blooming, all this freshness fuming, give God while worth consuming. Both thought and through, now bolder, and told by nature, tower, head, heart, hand, heel, and shoulder that beat and breathe and power, this pride of prime's enjoyment, take as for tool, not for toy meant, and hold at Christ's enjoyment. The vault and scope and schooling and mastery in the mind, and silk ash kept from cooling, and ripest under rind, what life half lifts the latch of, what hell stalks towards the snatch of, your offering will dispatch of. All right, so a difficult poem because of the vocabulary and the arrangement of his words. So this is nothing unusual about Hopkins, but we're going to go through it, and hopefully by the time I'm finished, you'll understand what he's doing here. So I'll read it again a little faster, and then we'll go to the analysis. The title, Morning, Midday, and Evening Sacrifice. The dappled die away, cheek and wimpled lip, the gold wisp, the airy gray, eye, all in fellowship. All this beauty blooming, all this freshness fuming, give God while worth consuming. Both thought and through, now bolder and told by nature, tower, head, heart, hand, heel, and shoulder that beat and breathe in power. This pride of prime's enjoyment, take as for tool, not for toyment, and hold at Christ's enjoyment. The vault in scope and schooling and mastery in the mind, and silk ash kept from cooling, and ripest under rind, what life half lifts the latch of, what hell stalks towards the snatch of, your offering with dispatch of. All right, now what I did here in the analysis is I'm going to begin with a prayer, a modern day prayer that pretty much does the same thing as this poem sets out to do. It's a simple prayer of self-offering, and this is how it might read. There are many of them. I just chose this one. Holy Spirit, God of love, be present to me, and let your love possess my whole being. Accept the offering of myself, which I make to you. Receive my hands, feet, eyes, tongue, and all my senses. Receive my memory, my will, my understanding, my desires, my sights, the longings, and the aspirations of my soul. Okay, so there's no question about what that poem says. I mean, that prayer says, right? Makes sense. There's no, struggle with the words. But in morning, midday, and evening, it's not the case, all right? So I begin just a couple of words about his style, the form of the poem, okay? And he uses a rhyming scheme of A, B, A, B, C, 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 all right? And there are 21 lines. That means there are 3 7-line stanzas. And overall, it produces a prayer of offering that carries a commentary as well as a prayer. So the poem's meaning is buried behind his innovative style and his difficult use of vocabulary. Okay, so we saw that. I read it through twice, and I don't know if you got it. But anyway, I wrote a little bit of a paragraph here on the obscureness of his works, and he has a signature style of unusual syntax and obscure vocabulary. We saw that in Inversnade, the Scottish poem, where he uses a lot of dialect in there. and he creates words as well. So Hopkins challenges the reader to uncover his meaning in almost all his works. This poem's no exception. Generally speaking, he was aware that his syntax posed this challenge in most of his poetry. I was reading in Mariani's book about his notes to his faithful companion, Robert Bridges, and in his letters back and forth, he comments on that. In one letter to his friend, Robert Bridges, he commented on a remark made by this priest by the name of Father Cyprian Splain, after learning that Splain couldn't read his handwriting, his cursive writing, which was really not the case at all. And this is what Hopkins said about Father Splain. He said, he perhaps read it, but he afterwards acknowledged that he found it unreadable. And I don't think he meant illegible. So that's kind of a joke. In other words, he could read my writing, but he didn't understand it. All right. And in another letter to his friend Patmore, he commented that his poetry is a vein of pure gold embedded in masses of unpracticable quartz. In other words, you have to chip away to get to the gold, and that's hard to do in most cases. And then to the same person, Patmore, he commented that thought and feeling of his poetry pose such difficulty that they therefore are of a kind to appeal to only a very few. That's what Patmore said of Hopkins' works. And even Bridges himself, this is his most well-known line. He said that reading his works is like you're having to deal with a great dragon folded at the gate, forbidding all entrance. All right, so I'm sure you've heard that before. All right, so that's just a word or two on the obscureness of this poem. And if you found difficulty in reading it, you're not alone. Okay, so that's what it's about. The title of the poem itself is a metaphor. And he speaks of morning. Let's go back. Morning, midday, and evening. Now, morning, that means youth. Okay, he talks about that in youth here. Okay, and midday, that is manhood. The breath of life, the middle of life, and evening, of course, old age. So that's what he's referring to. So even the title is a metaphor. Okay, let's go back here. It's a metaphor. Hopkins is referring to the three stages of life: childhood, maturity, and old age. In the first stanza, we are told that the beauty and charm of youth is fleeting, and therefore, when found in its prime, it should be then given as an offering to God, echoing the words of the prayer, "My desires, my sights, the longings, the aspirations of my soul I offer to you, my God." All right. So the vigor, the robust health, and beauty, and the vitality of youth all are represented in words like dappled and wimpled lip. That's like the little curve, I think they call it the cupid curve above your lip. And the gold wisp, that would be a shock of gold hair. Okay. So one thinks of rosy or ruddy blushing cheeks and shocks of golden hair, all in combination to produce a glowing or fuming or blooming of youth that he calls all in fellowship. So we'll go back to that. The dapple die away. In other words, nothing gold can stay. Idea of Frost. Nothing lasts. Beauty is fleeting. And cheek and wimpled lip, the gold wisp, the airy gray, turn to gray. All in fellowship. All right, all combined to make beauty at youth. All this beauty blooming, all this freshness fuming, give God while worth consuming. All right, in other words, by consuming means by making it an offering to God, so God can accept it. As a consumer, one who buys or accept goods and services. Okay, so the dapple die away. Therefore, the cheek and wimple lip, the gold wisp, airy gray, all in fellowship, all this beauty blooming, all this freshness fuming, give to God, while it is worth consuming. Okay, so that's youth right there. Now the second stanza, 7 lines, we go down to middle age, okay? And the second stanza continues the same idea, only now at a more mature stage of one's life, when one has gained experience in the business of living through experience. He speaks of the independent character of a grown adult now standing tall. Okay, what was the order back there? It said here. Let's see here. Tower. Okay, so that would mean to stand tall. Both thought and thought, that means muscles, now bolder. Okay, your thoughts are, more mature, more developed from your experiences, and told by nature. In other words, told, remember that word in the wreck of the Deutschland, the sister told. He used that word to represent it, all right, by nature. So nature demonstrates through a person's ability to speak well, articulate well, and his muscles, meaning his stature, okay? Head, heart, hand, heel, and shoulder, these all now are mature, and they breathe in power. They beat, their strength. This pride of primes enjoyment. So, it's like going to the gym and showing off your muscles kind of thing. So it's a prime time of life, time of enrichment, in one's life. Take it for a tool, he said. This is advice. He's advising us, man, to take as for a tool, not meant for toys, enjoyment, all right? For pleasure, seeking pleasure, and hold at Christ's enjoyment. So there's that, consuming, give to God for worth consuming, and hold at Christ's enjoyment as a consumer, okay? So here we're talking about, the maturity of life, and the person is no longer a child. Okay, when I was a child, I thought of a child of St. Paul. So here, he's wise, his wisdom, okay? So he's referring to man's wisdom now in thought, and he does refer to, physical characteristics as well, told by nature. Tower, stand tall, okay? Hand, heart, head, heart, hand, and heel, and shoulder, stand tall. That beat and breathe in power, demonstrating, your power now as a mature person. This pride of prime's enjoyment, take for a tool, use it differently, not just for sensual pleasure, all right, not for enjoyment. All right, now we'll go back down here again. All right, so my sights, longing, so hold them for Christ's enjoyment, reflecting the words of the above prayer. Receive my understandings, my desires, my sights, everything I aspire to be, my longings, all, for my soul, which is more important than the body, okay? He talks about the physical and the spiritual. All right, now we go on to the third stanza. And here he goes on to describe the discipline of a mature Christian. He speaks of the height and extent and the training and the discipline of mind in these words: vault, scope, schooling, and mastery. All right, so I'll go back to that in a second. But the third stanza describes the discipline of a mature Christian. He speaks of the height and the extent, the scope, and the training, okay, and the discipline of the self in the first 2 lines, saying the vault, scope, schooling, and mastery of the mind. So we'll go back to that, okay. The vault and scope and schooling and mastery in the mind, and silk ash kept from cooling. All right, we'll open that up in a minute. Silk ash kept from cooling. It's, encapsulated this. And ripest under rind, we'll see that. What life hath lifts the latch of, what hell stalks towards the snatch of, your offering with dispatch of. Okay, so let's go down and see what that means. So I'll read it again. The third line then goes on to describe the discipline of a mature Christian. He speaks of the height, the extent, and the training and the discipline of the self in the first two lines: vault, scope, schooling, and mastery of the mind. This idea is encapsulated in what he says, silk ash kept from cooling. So it's a metaphor. All right? And the metaphor suggests two ideas. First, it relates to the glowing embers of a fire being covered in a core of heat, covered by the gray ash, which coats the ember. And we saw that once before in the closing lines of the a poem where the dying embers in the hearth broke into vermilion. Remember that? All right, so that's what he's doing here. He's saying that this maturity and this, experience that you've developed in your lifetime is encapsulated and protected by the glowing embers of a fire being covered in a core of heat, covered by the gray ash which coats the ember. The second relates, now don't forget, it's two metaphors here. The second relates to the idea of old age in respect to the gray hair, which is contrasted to the first stanza, the gold wisp turning to airy gray, as noted in the first stanza. In short, the dapple died away with age. He furthers this image saying that it ripens under the rind, okay, which the ash represents as covering of the still hot ash ember within. All right, still hot ash ember within it. So we'll go back and read that again, then we'll conclude it. So the vault and scope and schooling, don't forget he's talking about old age now, and mastery in the mind, and silk ash kept from cooling, and ripest under rind, what life half lifts the latch of, what hell stalks towards the snatch of, your offering with dispatch of. All right, so the title of the poem is Metaphor. Wait a minute, we'll get down here, I'm sorry. The poem concludes with the statement that the offering of this prayer of body, mind, and spirit to God will safeguard one against the evil threats of life, which life half lifts the hatch of, and opens up this evil to endanger one. So that would be the temptations of life that are there, and life half lifts the latch. That would be like in a door, opening the door a little bit ways to the evil that is there, that, hell stalks towards the snatch of. All right? So that's the idea in those two lines. What hell stalks towards the snatch of, that would be us. All right? So we have to be safeguarded against these evils. The poem concludes with the statement that the offering of this prayer of body, mind, and spirit will safeguard one against the evil threats of life. All right, what hell stalks towards the snatch of, this prayer offering will dispatch of. And this means the offering of your life to Christ will promptly safeguard you from evil, and it will do it swiftly. And he is also suggesting that we do it swiftly as well in the end there. All right, so I'll read that last stanza. The vault and scope and schooling and mastery in the mind, and silk ash kept from cooling, okay, so that's encapsulated within the rind of, this is glowing underneath, all right, and ripest under the rind, what life half lifts the latch of, this, the ripest under the rind, will dispatch of. What is that? hell stalking to snatch us away. All right. Our offering to God will prevent that. Okay. And therefore dispatch, get rid of, drive off, dispel away, okay, the evils and temptations that life offers. Okay, so it's kind of a confusing poem, but it takes you through the three stages there, huh? That things don't last. All right, the dapple will die away, cheek and wimpled lip and gold wisp, the airy gray, eye all in fellowship, this, all this beauty blooming, this, all this freshness fuming, give God, wow, worth the consuming. Both thought and through, now bolder, and told by nature, tower, stand tall, head, heart, hand, heel, and shoulder, that beat and breathe in power, this stage of life. This pride of prime's enjoyment, take as for tool, not for toyment, and hold as Christ's enjoyment, not as your own. The vault and scope and schooling and mastery in the mind, and silk ash kept from cooling, and ripest under the rind, what life half lifts the hatch of, what hell stalks towards the snatch of, your offering with dispatch of. Okay, we'll quickly get rid of it. All right. So, simple prayer. This is the same idea. Holy Spirit, God of love, be present to me and let your love possess my whole being. Accept the offering of myself which I make to you. Receive my hands, feet, eyes, tongue, and all my senses. Receive my memory, my old age, my will, all my understandings, middle life, my desires, my sights, my longings, all my aspirations of my soul, and that will prevent me, that will secure me, okay, from the evils and temptations that hell is trying to snatch me from this life, okay? All right, so that's it. Don't forget, the title is a metaphor, 3 stages, okay, and my desires, my sights, my longings, my aspirations, the vigor, robust health, beauty, all of these quickly fade, okay, and therefore, while they're young and ripe, offer them to God, for his consuming. All are represented in words like dappled and wimpled. Wimpled, remember from another poem, means like folded, like a woman wears a wimpled neck, around her neck, and it's like pleated, okay, wimpled lip. So the lip, above the lip, they call it Cupid's curve, is that it's when you're young, okay, and gold wisp means wisp of hair, okay, rosy, ruddy cheeks, youth, okay, all in fellowship. Second stanza, mature stage, okay, we no longer a child, prime of life, stand tall, temptations have power to draw you from God's will, following God's will in the form of sensuous pleasures. He advises to take as for tool your powers to resist evil and not take them as toys, holding them for Christ's enjoyment. Offerings, reflecting the words of the prayer, receive my understandings, desires, sights, everything. And then finally, we see how he's referring to old age through the words gray, okay, metaphor suggesting glowing embers, almost like Shakespeare too, that time of year when thou mayest and me behold, when gray, when few or no, leaves upon the bare boughs shake against the cold. All right, that same idea in that poem where he takes you through the stages of life, and at the end, he is lying on the embers of his youth. Okay, so he does that here too, the still hot embers of your youth. Okay, and then the poem concludes with the prayer of offering everything to God and not being snatched away by the evils of hell. This prayer is an offering will dispatch you from that. Okay, so that's a quick summary of that poem.